Okay, I'm here with Karni. She's a filmmaker behind this brilliant feature comedy, Fuck You, Jessica, Blair. That's the name of it, you heard it right. Congratulations, welcome to Fusion London. Well
Thank you so much, good to be here.
Thank you. Synopsis, please.
My less favorite question. Two girls get lost in the middle of nowhere, and it's not proper how I wrote it, so I'm just kind of like improvising the synopsis right now. General idea behind it is Karni's character, which is named after no one in particular, pure coincidence, then gets kind of into a struggle with her own identity, both geographically, physically, mentally, and goes through this breakdown. And that is, she spends a few hours with Jessica, her best friend, in Israel. And basically the whole film takes place in that one day.
There's guns involved, I seem to remember, isn't there?
A
gun, isn't there?
But that's a bit of a spoiler.
That's a bit of a spoiler. So I know it's a pure coincidence that your name is in there. And it's
Yes.
pure coincidence that you made the film, but is it also coincidence? Is there any of it that's based on you? Because they say write what you know.
I mean, if you really want to go into that, you can find similarities. No, obviously it was inspired. I would say it was inspired autobiographically. And I sort of took some of those parts that were true and put them in different scenarios and kind of developed it. But I think at this point, what I've learned is since the film has been through so much, and since I wrote the script, it's been a few years that it's kind of like, I don't even see myself in that anymore, although it is...
Oh, because I was going to say you've grown up, it sounds patronising, I don't mean that, but choose my words carefully here, Steve. You've grown, there's been a few years between now and then, let's just say that, that's okay.
It takes a while before, so from the moment the script is ready and all that, and I think at the time I was struggling with a lot of issues that since then I'd like to believe, at least, that I've sort of overcome most of these ones.
So you don't look back and think, actually I'm not that person anymore, things are a little bit different, I wonder why I made that film?
No, not at all. I think it was a process that I needed to go through, and I think it's a complete, accurate presentation, I guess, of the place that I was in at the time. But I think the good thing about it is that now that it's been kind of a couple of years and I can see it, and I feel, I had this moment the other week that I was talking to someone about like my sexual identity, for example, and I was speaking about it very freely, and then I realized, oh, just a few years ago when I wrote that, I couldn't even speak about this freely. It was this massive thing that I wasn't dealing with, and I put that in a script, and instead of dealing with it properly and talk the way like I need to do it and accept about myself, I just wrote a script and made it into a film, which...
So it's like a catharsis, would that be the right word?
Yeah, that was sort of, I guess, my therapy.
like working its way through in the film, okay,
so I in no way disrespect that, because I think this film needed to happen for me to accept being bisexual, for me to accept a lot of other things in the place that I come from and things like that. It's just, now it's kind of a nice reminder of the fact that I've dealt with this, and now I'm in a good place with these things in the film.
So I spoke to an Israeli filmmaker a couple of years ago. He'd done this weird kind of horror, punk horror almost. It was a strange film, or science fiction actually. I can't remember the name of it.
Would it have been A10 something?
No, I don't think so. I can't remember. But I can't remember. But what was interesting is I asked him about the filmmaking support in Israel, and I'm sure he said it wasn't great. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I would have to say that in fair disclosure, I didn't even try to get funding for this specific film.
Was that because you knew it would be a no way?
I knew it would be a first-time director going with this film, which is a bit odd. I mean, it's not exactly a specific genre. It's not exactly a specific, it's something very, I think people aren't used to seeing this kind of thing on screen in Israel yet.
It came across a bit of a road movie to me.
Yeah, it is kind of a combination, but I had a friend who's a filmmaker, and he said, your movie's not exactly comedy, it's not exactly drama, it's not exactly LGBT, it's not exactly, like I can't place it if I would have to pitch it.
So when I said to you, can I describe it as a comedy, you actually, that would be telling a bit of a fib really, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit of all those things, it's a different kind of thing. So for me, it's more inspired by like independent 90s American films like Hal Hartley, Adrian Shelley, Jim Jarmusch kind of language, but it's also part Hebrew, part English, which is also a bit weird.
Yeah, that was a bit of a it was a curveball, because I've seen that kind of thing before, but it's not. Why did you do that anyway? What was the
well, I think that was part of the identity struggle that I was going through at the time, and it was kind of being reluctant to speak Hebrew, and also the character of Jessica was an American character, so it was sort of a combination of how do I put that character in the film, and also put this something that's identifying with my character. which just is refusing to speak Hebrew. So if having Jess there, then it sort of makes it, okay, then you have to speak English because that's how they're used to communicate. And then the guys themselves, they speak Hebrew and the film takes place in Israel. So that would draw them into Hebrew, you know, without like whether or not Karni wants it.
Yeah. No, I understand what you mean. I'm just intrigued to know it was relevant to that time in your life and set in Israel and made in Israel. So it wouldn't really translate, would it be irrelevant to make it now, but I suppose you're saying making the same film now out of that geographical zone, it just wouldn't really be any point, would there? You made it there for a particular reason.
Yeah, I think it had to be there. It was part of that process.
Yeah, and that's part of it, sort of the background. So have you made something else since then in Israel? Because we should point out you're actually living in the UK now, and in fact not far from here, I think. But have you? Which is
also fun because I speak about it in the film about like living in London, and here I am living
and here
in
you
London.
are. Yeah. So I mean, how does it compare making films or making anything here artistic as opposed to your homeland?
I think I haven't made a film here. I made like a short one in Ireland with a couple of friends, but that was sort of us doing it independently, just something short for us.
Northern Ireland, yeah?
No, Dublin.
Yeah. Okay.
I lived in Dublin for a couple of years.
Oh yeah, I almost saying okay.
Yeah, and I think now it's sort of, there's an interesting conflict now. So if you mentioned funding, for example, I tend to write most of my scripts in English, even though my first language is Hebrew. I don't know why. I think in English. I tend to write it. It's easier for me. I express myself better. And
that's because we invented the best language. We've had the best writers.
I think in a way it's more freeing than Hebrew in some ways. Actually,
I've got no point of reference. I don't know a word of Hebrew, so I don't know.
Well, Hebrew, for example, you would have everything is very gendered. So you have to refer to. You can't just say you. There's a different you to a female, to a male, to multiple, to like one person. Yeah, so I think it's very, in a way, it's more specific, but it also could be very limiting. And sometimes I don't like to use that. Sometimes I kind of like to use those, to have a lot of word plays, I guess, with the English language. It's easier because you don't have to use a specific you that is gendered to this, and you kind of can play with it a bit more when you write a script. So now my next project, for example, it is written in English fully. And I found that it's even more challenging if I actually want to try to get funding. So Jessica Blair, I decided because I can do it low budgety and I had some support from filmmaker friends, and I'm just going to go for it, take the money that I saved up and do it myself.
Go take the money and run.
Yeah, just go for it instead of waiting for like film funds, because it can take years, you might get rejected, all that. And I was like, no, I can do this in a year, I'm just going to do it. And now it's sort of like, well, you have all these more, I guess, limitations, because even though I live in London, I'm not a UK citizen, for example, and getting funding is more limited if I want to film it here. And then if I want to film it in Israel, I don't have a justification to film an Israeli film in English, because that's not realistic. No one would film, I guess.
No, I know where you're coming from.
So now I'm kind of in between. If I actually want to make an English film, but I want to make it in Israel, it's kind of like, now the funding is becoming more tricky, and I guess I haven't figured that one out yet.
No, well, I don't know how it works. If you're, I mean, obviously, that bloody awful word Brexit, but pre-Brexit, of course, in terms of immigration status, if you're within the EU, you can live here forever, and it'll probably stay the same. But if you're from outside the EU, how does that work with? Is it a similar kind of gig if you're Israeli? You can stay kind of indefinitely, or is it not that simple?
Well, right now I'm a student, and I also have a dual passport with the EU, so...
okay, so you've got, so you can, so you haven't got any of that worry.
So far. So I guess at the end of this year, when I finish my MFA, I'll find out.
I think we have a good... Look, it's all about relationships with other countries, and I'm pretty sure we have a very good relationship with countries. I'm sure it's it will be ad infinitum if you want, or not sure, but I'm fairly sure. So a couple of things. I know we laughed and joked about the actual full title of the film, but was this the first choice, the title? Did you have enough time to think, excuse me saying this, fuck it, I'm going to go with that title? How did that work?
So if I'm being honest, it started out as a joke.
Did someone say it? So fuck you know.
I did.
Oh, okay.
It was sort of a joke. It was kind of like I had the whole script ready. I did not have a title. I tend to get stuck at the titles. I can write the whole text. I can write 100 pages, but then I'll get stuck at the title. And then we started getting the production, and people kept being like, okay, well, you need a title, at least a working title, something to get this. And then we needed to print the scripts for the actors and all that. And we got into a very late, I guess, place in the production, and you have to have like something to go with because you're doing pre-production. And I was like, I just don't have a title. And I was like, I don't know. And I was speaking to my lead actress, whose name is Jessica, and it was not Blair.
No.
But it was, and then we sort of started laughing about it. And I was like, you know what? How about I'm just gonna say this? This is a good film title. And then we kind of joked and put it as, like, she was like fine with it. She thought it was funny. We put it as a working title. And then we kept being like, yeah, we got to change it. Obviously, we have to change it. But we used it for the filming, and then we used it in editing. And my editor kept being like, yeah, we should probably change it. But then the longer it kept like not being changed,
you're kicking the can down the road, I guess, so, just to avoid it.
And we got into the end, we're like, okay, this is the title. Nothing else makes sense.
Do you think, or did you ever consider? Sorry, to interrupt you then.
No.
Would it have worked as a short film?
I don't think so. I think because I like giving film like things the time to happen. So my film has a lot of long pauses, a lot of awkwardness, because the whole situation is awkward and uncomfortable, and I wanted to give that the time to happen. So not too, like, I don't think that could have been cut. You know, it's currently like 80 minutes, and I think anything that would have cut that would have not been what this specific film should be.
And I always think, I mean, I've asked this question often about writing comics. I always think it's the most difficult thing to write. This is a personal point of view, but and you may not agree with that, but can you give us an idea of how difficult it is for script writing, but then again, if you agree with what I'm saying, to get up that level to make it comedic, because it's hard, and the reason I always think that is because what might be funny to you may not be funny to me, right? So, for instance, you might think jokes about Donald Trump are funny or not funny. I don't know, and that's none of my business. But if it is, you think it's funny, but it might not wash for me. So how do you sort of balance? Because you've got to get it right, isn't you?
Yeah, I think that's the thing though with this film, because I didn't, when I wrote it, it wasn't. I guess I wrote what I thought was funny, because I deal with all these dramatic things in it, but I deal with it in a comic way, because that's how I deal with things in life as well. And I think when I wrote it, it was kind of, I didn't know what to expect, especially internationally. So there's a lot of Israel jokes in the film, for example, that only make Israelis laugh, because they don't know what certain cities in Israel means. Like if you would use a joke here about, like, you know, different cities like North or South England or London. So a lot of people in the UK would know, you know, what that means to be from Yorkshire, to be from London or Oxford or things like that. Whereas, and I think those jokes get a bit lost, obviously.
In translation,
because it's impossible. Like, no one abroad knows what Petah Tikva means to Israelis. Like, it's a city that there's constant jokes about it within Israel. That's a city that I'm from.
Yeah, so if you say so.
Exactly. So, like, I had an Israeli person in the screening, for example, of the film, and he thought it was funny, but he was the only one laughing out loud because
and
no one else.
And what the fuck?
And he had to explain to the others later on. I saw him explain to them what is the meaning of this city in the context. And I think when I wrote it, I was just kind of, I wrote what I thought was funny. But now that I'm kind of going with it in festivals around the world, I'm finding very different reactions. So there are certain countries that people almost didn't laugh, and they thought it was very tragic. Like, they mainly got very deeply kind of like into the zone of overthinking it. Whereas in England, most people did find it funny. I had a screening up north, like in Bradford, and people were hysterically laughing the whole thing. And Argentina's similar. So I think it's interesting for me to see what kind of audiences have which reactions. And
so you've got that treatment. Say it's at 80 pages, obviously 80 minutes, 80 pages, approximately. And you're waving around thinking, I think this is okay. You've done 10 drafts, but I'm assuming that you're then going to give it some, say, what do you think? Or I don't know how you work, obviously. Yeah. But is that kind of what you're doing? You're trying to hone it up to make sure everything. I'll give you an example. I remember John Cleese was talking about, you've seen 40 Towers, right? You've seen 40 Towers, right? And he was saying that each script, I think it was it 3 or 6 months to write? It might be 6 months to hone it down, to get it just to be exactly as you want. I know that's perhaps a bit of an extreme example, and I can understand why. So would you write that, hone it, pass it on? What's your practice? Are you honing it with other people as you go?
Well, the first thing I do is I write it. There were things that were cut out later. Of course, I write the first draft, and then I have one friend who edits usually my script. He's a brilliant script writer, and I really trust him. So he's always the first one to read the script, and then he gives me back his notes. And he's so accurate. I'm lucky to have him, because he's always like, this is exactly what didn't work in this part. It's like, oh, you're right. I was going crazy about it.
He's right, yeah.
Always, every time. He was my teacher in the university as well, so he knows what he's doing, and he's so on point with it. And then once I do the fixed draft, I send it to him again, and then I send it to a couple more friends. One of them is an actress.
Right.
And my cinematographer, I always work with him. And once they give me the reactions, I kind of know, because they're very accurate. So if they go, I laughed out loud the whole time, I know, okay, it's working. If I had this, you know, this person sitting at home laughing out loud reading the script, that's a good sign. But that's just step one. And then once you get those reactions from a few people, you feel confident to sort of go with production. But then when you start reading it with production, sometimes it doesn't work with actors. Sometimes you're like, this line doesn't work. No matter how much I thought it was going to, no matter how much it was, you know, it was read funny, the way it's on stage now, it's not working. And then we either cut it or we accept that maybe it's not, maybe it is dramatic. And usually in editing, there's a whole new process of it. You know, once you get to editing, it's another rewrite of the script in a lot of ways. You see what doesn't work on camera. You thought it would work, it did work on set, but now it's not working when you see it. So I guess from the first moment that you write it and until it actually everything gets cut, and even soundtrack. Sometimes the soundtrack adds a bit to make something funny that you didn't thought was funny. Yeah. So I think until it's completely finalized, there's still different things. And even now, still, there's different points that different people laugh, which is, I think, amazing.
And if you... carry on, do carry on.
No, it's still changing. Like, there's certain bits that people laughed here, but they wouldn't laugh in another country. You know, it's still... It's never, I think, completely unit to everyone. It's not a complete unity. It's amazing.
And I always look sometimes when I talk to filmmakers, I get the impression that they never, their films aren't ever finished. That sounds a bit of an odd thing to say because if you ask them, they always want to be honing it down. But you've got to let the baby go once. You know, there may be now you might be thinking, oh, actually, I wish I'd edited this out or added this sound effects, but I don't know. But you know, but the trouble with that is, it's you know, it's like the sword of Damocles. You're going to be, you know, you're damned, aren't you? You know, I think you just got to let it go, get to a point. So I know you're doing some theatre work at the moment. So let's assume that you've got two lives that you can choose. And one of those lives is to be the #1 theatre producer with the #1 productions, or to take the road to cinema and you've got exactly the same kind of adulation and, well, adulation, that's the wrong word to use. You've achieved what you ultimately want to do with cinema, so you are one of the great directors, for argument's sake. Each of those roads would give you the exactly same earning in life. It'd be no different. You can only choose one of those paths. What are you going to go for?
Interesting question, because my first instinct is always to rebel. I'd be like, well, why can't I be both? But
well, thank God you can. But if you had to choose,
I mean, film is my passion. Like, it's always my first passion. That's my therapy. That's what I do in my go time mainly. So most of the time, I think the unique part of a film is for me that it's more individual. So theater is a different experience for me, and I go and I watch plays a lot here, and I love theater, and I love watching it. I think it's brilliant, and I love making it. But since I was a kid, I'm obsessed with cameras as well, and I think there's something for me that's very therapeutic about, first of all, being able to do that and kind of have it carry on. So theater would be in the moment, and then once the production is over, someone can redo my script in a later time, but that's it. And I think it's a unique experience to itself. Like, it's amazing to know, you know, I remember plays that I've seen like 20 years ago, and that's it. That was the only time that play would have been with these people and this production and this director, and it's an amazing memory. But I think there is something about films that for me it works maybe because it's everlasting. So in 100 years when I'm gone, there's still going to be a copy of this film that someone might watch and like, and that would do something to them. And I think that's sort of a magic that I really relate to, because it gives you this kind of, it's a completely different language. It just has that thing that you know it's there to last. I can see now like so many directors that have long passed, and
I mean, you look at someone like Orson Welles or something like that, or I mean, the list is endless, really. But that's one that comes to, you know, everyone still, it's the go-to film for, a lot of people say the best film ever made was Citizen Kane, you know, whether you agree with that. Oh, it is an amazing film. But when did he die? 40 years ago, I guess, you know, so.
But you can still see the film, and I think with the theater director, if it's not like a play that's written and a theater writer, that we still do that, you know, like with Oscar Wilde and things, we still see Shakespeare forever, it's gonna run. But at the same time, the directors, they were doing something with it at a specific timing, and once all people that have watched it, I guess, will be gone, and except for documentation here and there, it's not gonna have the same impact, I think.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
That was wonderful, as I knew it would be, just say that.